Hello, welcome to Wade's Year-By-Year Flashback, courtesy of Wikipedia. Yes, that is not my sponsor, but, you know. Anyway, this year that I'm looking at is 2011, and apparently there is a Smithereens album called that, which I did not know. I've heard of the Smithereens, but the disambiguation page says there's an album by them called that. Anyway, I'm not going to read literally everything on this page, but a substantial amount of it. So, 2011 was a common year starting on Saturday of the Gregorian calendar, the 211th year of the Common Era, CE, and Anno Domini AD designations, the 11th year of the third millennium, the 11th year of the 21st century, and the second year of the 2010s decade. 2011 was designated as the International Year of Forests, the International Year of Chemistry, and the International Year for People of African Descent. Alright, so let's skip a little bit and look at the events. And I did kind of give a little look at this before I got started, and it turns out not much good happened in January of 2011. Looks like mostly bad news. Well, what can you say? That's humanity, right? Anyway, January 1st, Estonia officially adopts the euro currency and becomes the 17th Eurozone country. Well, that's not so bad. Well, at least compared to some stuff. But a bomb explodes as Coptic Christians in Alexandria, Egypt, leave a New Year's service, killing 23 people. Well, that's a bit of a downer. And January 4th, Tunisian street vendor Mohamed Bouazizi, sorry, I messed that one up. Anyway, he dies after setting himself on fire a month earlier, sparking anti-government protests in Tunisia and later the other Arab nations. These protests become known collectively as the Arab Spring. Well, I definitely remember that. It was definitely the talk of the town and the talk of the world, pretty much. January 9th through the 15th, Southern Sudan holds a referendum on independence. The Sudanese electorate votes in favor of independence, paving the way for the creation of the new state in July. Well, that could be good, so long as the new state is not a bad one. I mean, well, I guess all states are kind of bad, ultimately, but some are better than others. January 9th, the Iran Air Flight 277 crashes near Urumqi in the northeast of the country, killing 77 people. Another downer. January 14th, the Tunisian government falls after a month of increasingly violent protests. President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali flees to Saudi Arabia after 23 years in power. Seems like a lot of people are fleeing, or getting killed or something. January 24th, 37 people are killed and more than 180 others wounded in a bombing at, Domodedovo International Airport in Moscow, Russia. Even the Russians are, not faring too well here. So yeah, February 2011, and February 11th, the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, who I definitely remember, that name was also all over the place. Anyway, he resigns after widespread protests calling for his departure, leaving control of Egypt in the hands of the military until a general election can be held. And February 15th, the first Libyan civil war starts. Seems like a pretty tumultuous year. Like a lot of really crazy stuff was happening. Probably more than certain other years, I would say. Anyway, February 22nd through March 14th, uncertainty over Libyan oil output causes crude oil prices to rise 20% over a 2-week period following the Arab Spring, causing the 2011 energy crisis. Now, I kind of remember that. Not really that much, though. It's just one of those things, down the memory hole, which is kind of why it's interesting to look back. Anyway, getting on to March. March 6th had civil uprising. There was a civil uprising phase of the Syrian civil war. It was triggered when 15 youths in Daraa are arrested for scrawling graffiti on their school wall denouncing the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. Ugh. Jeez. Man. Off to a bad start in March, too. Is there anything, optimistic that happens in this year? Like a single... doesn't really sound like it. Anyway, March 11th, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake and subsequent tsunami hit the east of Japan, killing 15,840 and leaving another 3,926 missing. Shit, what a depressing year this was. Man, I remember this too. Tsunami warnings are issued in 50 countries and territories. Emergencies are declared at 4 nuclear power plants affected by the quake. You know what? Normally, people like to trash talk people who talk about the apocalypse a lot, but, this year kind of made some of them seem like they might not have been totally crazy. Because there was a lot of crazy shit happening in 2011, I would say. And anyway, moving on to March 15th, Hamad bin Isa al Khalifa, King of Bahrain, declares a 3-month state of emergency as troops from the Gulf Cooperation Council are sent to quell the civil unrest. Civil unrest, tsunamis, earthquakes, civil wars. I don't know. I was saying that 2016 was a crappy year, but actually 2011 actually looked kind of worse. I mean, don't get me wrong, 2016 was terrible, but look at all this stuff that was going on. This was not something to be very optimistic about with all this crap going on in the news. You kind of have to be dumb to be that optimistic about it. I'm sorry, but lots of bad stuff happening. Anyway, protests break out across Syria, demanding democratic reforms. Sounds good. Resignation of President Bashar al-Assad. Sounds alright, possibly. And release of those imprisoned for the March 6th Daraa protest. The government responds by killing hundreds of protesters and laying siege to various cities, beginning the Syrian civil war. Well, there you have it. Again and again. War. Was there a famine thrown into the mix? I mean, maybe a zombie horde attacked a city that I didn't hear about. Anyway, March 17th, the United Nations Security Council votes 10-0 to create a no-fly zone over Libya in response to allegations of government aggression against civilians. I remember that as well. March 19th, in light of continuing attacks on Libyan rebels by forces in support of leader Muammar Gaddafi, military intervention authorized under UNSCR 1973 begins as French fighter jets make reconnaissance flights over Libya. Whew. That all happened, I guess. Seems like a blur almost. Anyway, April 2nd, India wins the 2011 Cricket World Cup. Wow. That actually sounds, compared to this other shit going on, that sounds delightful. I'm not a, big World Cup fan, but that sounds better than this other stuff going on. No wonder why people like sports so much. Anyway, April 11th, former Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo is arrested in his home in Abidjan by supporters of elected President Alassane Ouattara with support from French forces. This effectively ends the 2010-2011 Ivorian crisis and civil war. Well, that's arguably good news. I mean, civil war and a crisis are said to have ended. It's a little bit of a positive thing, maybe. So, April 15th, the Mexican town of Cherán is taken over by vigilantes in response to abuses from the local drug cartel. The new government is strongly focused on crime reduction and preserving the local environment. Well, I guess that might be good too. The environment's important. If they're actually doing anything to reduce crime, forgive me for being skeptical, but it's possible maybe they came up with some program that actually did a couple things. And moving on to April 25th through the 28th, the 2011 super outbreak forms in the southern, Midwest, and eastern United States with a tornado count of 362, killing 324 and injuring over 2,200. Well, we're back to the obviously bad stuff again, a super outbreak of tornadoes. I kind of remember that too. So April 29th, an estimated 2 billion people watched the wedding of Prince William, Duke of Cambridge, and Catherine Middleton at Westminster Abbey in London. Well, gee golly gosh. I guess people do need distractions after all. I think with all this other crap going on, I'm not going to bash people who were interested in that wedding. Not too much anyway. This was definitely a year where you might look at it and say, well, maybe there's something to seeking distraction and entertainment, just so we don't all go crazy and, resort to cannibalism or what have you, because it was kind of an apocalyptic year. But anyway, that's it for part 1 of this. I'm going to get on to May, and yeah, rough year.